They say you're kind, that you're empathetic, that you have a gift for understanding people, reading the room, calming the storm, making others feel seen. And maybe you believe them. Until one day you realized something was missing. What if feeling everything isn't a gift? What if it's how you quietly vanished? Carl Jung warned of a danger that few recognize until it's already happening: ego loss. Not dramatic, not explosive, just the slow erosion of your identity, worn down by the constant absorption of everyone else's pain. This isn't just sensitivity, it's survival. From the beginning, you were the one who noticed what others didn't. You sensed the tension in your mother's voice before you understood what anxiety meant. You read your father's silence like a language. You adjusted yourself before anyone asked you to, because you learned that staying safe sometimes meant disappearing just enough. And over time, you became excellent at it. You learned how to make people feel better. You listened, absorbed, consoled. You smiled when you were tired, softened when you were angry, agreed when you disagreed. Not because you were dishonest, but because conflict felt like drowning and harmony was your oxygen, and that's the problem. Because when you live as a mirror for others, eventually your own reflection fades. And no one sees it, because you're still functioning, you're still kind, still strong. Still the one who gets it. But who gets you? Jung wrote that the world will ask who you are. And if you don't know, the world will tell you, and it will get it wrong. It will hand you roles: caretaker, peacekeeper, empath, sponge, and call them virtues. And because you've always been the one who adjusts, you'll wear them like they were always yours. But they aren't. You aren't just someone who feels deeply. You're someone who exists beneath the feelings. You are not the reflection. You are the light behind the glass. And yet every time you soften your truth, every time you stay quiet so others can stay comfortable, you dim. Until you start to wonder, was I ever here at all? Soren Kierkegaard called it the most silent tragedy. The greatest hazard of all, losing oneself, can occur very quietly in the world, as if it were nothing at all. And for empaths, that's the curse. Your compassion becomes a cloak, and the person beneath it slowly disappears. But this isn't about blame. This is about recognition. Because if you've been praised for being easy to be around, helpful, selfless, but somewhere deep inside you feel unseen, unheard, unreal, then you're not imagining it. You're experiencing the curse Jung warned us about: empathy without self, feeling without anchoring, love without identity. So ask yourself, if your whole life has been shaped around what others feel, do you even remember what you feel like? Because empathy without boundaries isn't a superpower, it's a slow surrender. And the cost is you. There's a reason you're so tired, and it's not just because you didn't sleep. It's the weight you picked up without noticing, the moods that weren't yours, the emotions that passed through the air like static and sank into your skin before you had the chance to say no. And that's because your body doesn't say no. It listens, it absorbs, it mirrors. Neuroscientists call them mirror neurons, specialized cells that fire not just when you feel something, but when you see someone else feel it. And for people like you, those neurons fire louder, faster, longer. You don't just understand emotions, you replicate them internally, automatically, physically. This isn't some poetic metaphor, it's measurable. It's real. In one study, students placed with depressed roommates began showing symptoms of depression themselves within weeks. Another revealed that a spouse's joy or sorrow directly altered their partner's hormonal balance. Just being near someone happy could lower cortisol. Being near someone anxious could spike it. Empathy doesn't just connect people, it chemically entangles them. And if you're an empath, you don't even need words. A glance, a pause, a sigh, that's all it takes. Your nervous system picks it up and makes it your own. And over time, your brain can no longer tell where you end and someone else begins. Carl Jung called this state participation mystique, a fusion with the emotional field of another or of the collective. It's when you unconsciously surrender your edges. You stop being a person and start being a vessel. And the world loves you for it. You're the one who understands, who listens, who doesn't complain. You hold the pain no one else can name. You're the emotional first responder, and no one sees the wounds you take on. Because you hide them well. Empathy becomes your role, and roles become masks. And masks, when worn too long, stop feeling like costumes. They feel like identity. And just like that, you forget what your own face looked like before it was covered in concern. Modern psychologists call it emotional labor. It's what happens when care becomes currency. When you manage other people's feelings without being asked. When being liked means being emotionally available at all times, even if it breaks you. And that labor left unspoken becomes burnout. Compassion fatigue isn't about a lack of love. It's about too much emotional intake with no release. It's drowning in a flood of feelings that were never yours to carry in the first place. But here's the tragedy, you don't stop. Because the very thing that exhausts you is the thing that makes you feel useful, needed, valuable. You become addicted to service because it's the only place you've been allowed to feel safe. And even when your body begs for rest, your mind whispers, they need me. But what if they don't need you broken? What if the people who truly love you need you whole? Because empathy without boundaries is not love, it's exposure. It's raw nerve against raw world. And eventually the friction leaves scars. So ask yourself this, if you're always the one absorbing the storm, when do you get to breathe? When do you get to feel without filtering? When does someone sit beside your silence and say, this too matters? Because if you don't know where the pain ends and you begin, that's not empathy, that's erasure. And it's time you found your edges again. You've been told your empathy is a gift, that your ability to sense and feel others so deeply is something special. And maybe you believed it. At first it felt like a superpower. Being able to hold the world's pain, its joy, its sorrow without flinching, without breaking, it made you needed. It made you feel seen. But what happens when being needed becomes a way of not needing yourself? There's a story you've probably heard before, one that's been told for centuries. The myth of Echo, the nymph who could only repeat the words of others. She had a voice, she had a story. But she was cursed to speak only the last words spoken to her. No original thoughts, no unique voice, just a reflection. She fell in love with Narcissus, a boy obsessed with his own reflection. She followed him through the forest, hoping he would see her, but he didn't, he only saw himself. When she reached for him, he recoiled. And when she tried to love him, he rejected her. In the end, Echo faded into nothing, her body withering away, her voice the only thing left behind. She didn't die from a lack of love. She died from not being seen, from losing herself in the reflection of someone else's gaze. This is the curse of the empath. We become so good at reflecting others' emotions, so skilled at mirroring their moods, their pain, their joy, that we forget how to speak our own truths. We become the mirror, the echo. We repeat what others say, we reflect what they feel until we no longer remember what our own voice sounds like. Empaths, in their quest to help, to heal, to understand, can become a version of echo mirroring, blending in so much that they fade out entirely. They believe that to love is to dissolve, to become invisible to their own needs in service of others. But this isn't love, this is erasure. This is losing yourself for the sake of a connection that was never fully yours to begin with. And the problem isn't just external, it's internal too. Because the more we become accustomed to echoing others, the less we recognize our own desires, boundaries, and emotions. The more we silence ourselves to make space for others, the more we lose track of who we are, what we need, what we feel. Carl Jung warned us that without a true sense of self, without ego boundaries, we begin to fade into the background, becoming reflections of the people around us. He called it the persona, the mask we wear to navigate the world. But the mask is not the self. The more we live behind the mask, the more the self withers in silence. And it's not just about being silenced by others. Sometimes it's about silencing ourselves. Saying yes when we mean no. Smiling when we want to scream. Agreeing when we disagree. Over time, our voice becomes smaller, less confident. Our presence fades like an echo in an empty room. But here's the thing. The mask isn't just a mask, it's a prison. When we lose our voice, when we reflect others so completely that we forget who we are, we don't just lose connection to our own needs, we lose the very thing that makes us whole. The empath's true gift isn't just in absorbing or reflecting. It's in being able to bring that energy into the world without sacrificing themselves in the process. So here's the question. If you've been reflecting everyone else's story, do you even remember how to tell your own? There's a myth we've all been sold, that the more we give, the more virtuous we become. The more we sacrifice, the nobler we are. This idea is deeply embedded in our culture, especially for empaths. After all, how often have you been praised for putting others first? For staying silent when you had something to say? For holding space when your own voice was drowning? But the reality of this martyrdom is darker than most care to admit. Because when you give and give but never receive in return, something inside you starts to wither. Something precious begins to fade. Simone Weil, one of history's most tragic figures, understood this all too well. She starved herself to death, refusing food in solidarity with those suffering in Nazi-occupied France. Her empathy wasn't just intellectual, it was physical. She absorbed the world's pain until it consumed her. She didn't just empathize with the suffering of others, she made it her own. She believed that by embodying their suffering, she could somehow make it easier to bear. But instead she dissolved into it. She lost herself in their pain. Her story is extreme, yes. But for many empaths, it's not unfamiliar. Maybe you haven't starved yourself to death, but you've certainly starved your own needs. Maybe you've neglected your own desires, your own joy, just to make sure everyone else around you feels okay. You've stood by, watched others thrive, and stayed silent because you didn't want to impose. And maybe, just maybe, you believed that this was love. Jung spoke about the dangers of this unbalanced empathy, the kind that takes on the suffering of others without boundary or self-awareness. He warned that when we become so attuned to others, we risk losing ourselves entirely. The self we try so hard to preserve, our integrity, our sense of self, our inner voice, becomes buried beneath the weight of everyone else's expectations, needs, and projections. But let's be clear, this is not true compassion. It's emotional exhaustion. And the longer you live this way, the more you lose yourself. Not just to others, but to the very concept of selfless love that's been sold to you as a virtue. Because in truth, selflessness isn't about losing yourself for others. It's about finding the balance between caring for others and caring for yourself. It's about being present, being there for others without erasing your own identity. You can love deeply without disappearing. You can give generously without losing your voice. The martyr doesn't make the world better. The martyr burns out the flame that could have illuminated everyone's path. The question you need to ask yourself is, what would happen if you stopped saving everyone? What would happen if you started saving yourself? Because the cost of never looking after your own heart, your own soul, your own boundaries is not just personal exhaustion. It's the complete erasure of who you are. And when you disappear like that, you rob the world of the fullness of your light. Empathy isn't about becoming invisible. It's about standing strong enough to hold others' pain without letting it consume your own. And if you don't take the time to care for yourself, you won't have anything left to give. You deserve to be loved for who you are, not just for how much you give. You deserve to rest without guilt. You deserve to speak your truth, even if it's uncomfortable. Because the world needs you whole, not hollow. Not erased, but alive. So ask yourself, if you've been carrying everyone else's weight, when will you choose to put that down and stand tall for your own truth? Chapter 5, Individuation, the Awakening. There's a moment deep inside where everything changes. It's not loud or dramatic. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or fanfare. But it is the beginning of something crucial, the return of you. You don't have to lose yourself to love others. You don't have to drown in their pain, their sorrow, their needs. You don't have to disappear to be seen. For empaths, this realization feels like a quiet revolution. It's a shift from giving everything, every feeling, every part of you, to finding that you can exist alongside others' emotions without becoming one of them. You don't need to absorb the world's pain to understand it. You don't need to carry every burden to care about it. This is what Carl Jung meant when he spoke of individuation, the process of becoming whole. Individuation isn't about rejecting others or shutting yourself off from the world. It's about recognizing and embracing the parts of yourself that have been hidden, pushed aside, or ignored. It's about integrating those parts and understanding that to be truly loving and empathic, you need to maintain a strong sense of self. Until now, you may have believed that your empathy meant you needed to be open to everyone all the time. That to love was to lose yourself, to make yourself porous to every emotional storm around you, but that's not love, that's depletion. The truth is, you can be empathic and still have boundaries. You can be loving and still know where your emotions end and someone else's begin. You don't have to become a sponge for the world's pain to be the one who understands it. You can feel deeply and still have a voice. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It's a practice, a quiet unfolding. The more you realize that your own boundaries, your own needs matter, the more you begin to reclaim what's yours. Your voice, your feelings, yourself. Jung's idea of individuation speaks to this. The self cannot be fully realized without understanding and embracing all parts of it. The shadow, the light. The parts of you that are angry, sad, joyful, fearful, the parts that have been rejected or ignored. As you begin this journey, you'll feel a tension. It feels unnatural at first, almost selfish to put your needs before others. But it's the most selfless thing you can do, to honor your own boundaries, to fill yourself up so that you have something real and authentic to offer others. In this moment, you will realize that you were never meant to drown in the emotions of others. You were meant to feel them and let them pass through. To be a bridge, not a sponge. You are not the sum of everyone else's pain. You are the one who can feel the weight of the world and still stand. You don't lose your identity by feeling, you gain it. And in that gaining, you find something extraordinary, the ability to love fully without disappearing. The ability to care without becoming consumed. This is individuation. This is you reclaiming the self. Chapter 6. The return of the self, reclaiming your voice. The moment you realize that you've been lost in the service of others, it's like waking from a long, unremembered dream. You've spent so much time holding others up, being the emotional anchor, the caretaker, the one who listens and heals, and you've neglected your own needs, your own voice, your own soul. But this moment is different. This is the moment you remember. You're allowed to be whole, You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to have needs and desires that matter, even if no one else notices. This is the return of yourself. The reawakening of the parts of you that were hidden away. The ones that got quiet because they were told they weren't as important as everyone else's. It's time to change the narrative. You can't keep pouring from an empty cup. You can't keep giving everything you have without taking the time to replenish. And you certainly can't give from a place of depletion and still expect to feel whole. This is not love, this is martyrdom, this is emotional burnout. So the question becomes, what if you stopped putting others first? What if you started listening to your own voice? What if you said no when you meant it and yes when you truly felt called? What if you stopped apologizing for needing space, for taking time for yourself? This is the radical act of self-respect, to stand up and say, I'm Ada. To claim your space without guilt. To demand that your needs be met, not just for the sake of others, but because you deserve to be taken care of too. When you begin to say no, you'll realize something important. You've never been selfish for setting boundaries. You've been human. This is not an act of rejection, it's an act of love. Loving yourself means standing firm in who you are, in what you need, in what you want, and not shrinking in order to fit into the world's expectations of you. This is your voice returning, the one that got lost in the service of others, the one that got quiet, muted, softened, the one that's now waking up. And when it wakes up, everything changes. The moment you reclaim your voice, you step into your power. You take your rightful place in the world, not as a passive observer, but as an active creator of your life. You begin to own your truth. You speak it even if it's uncomfortable. You honor it even if it's different from what others expect. Empathy isn't about erasing yourself for others. It's about feeling deeply while standing firmly in your own space. It's about loving others without losing yourself in the process. This is the return of the self. So ask yourself, when was the last time you truly said yes to yourself? When was the last time you claimed your own voice unapologetically? Because you are not here to disappear. You're here to be seen, to speak your truth, and to stand strong in your own light. The world doesn't need another echo. It needs you, all of you.